sort of education are they going to get? What sort of emotional support? That's what we're going to discuss now with Leonora Langley, who's the author of a book. It's called Let the Souls of Our Children Sing. And she's a former international journalist, teacher, psychotherapist, and as I said now, author. And she's on the line. Hello, Leonora.
Good morning, Robert. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, all things considered. When you talk about let the souls of our children sing, is that because you think we don't usually?
I think some parents and educators are aware of that, and they obviously try to do that. I think what we learned mostly from COVID and being in the pandemic was that the most important thing in life is our relationships with people, how we relate to each other. And for many years, I've been thinking that perhaps we need a new paradigm for mainstream education in particular, where parents and teachers help children to develop radical self-love and self-compassion rather than fear, intimidation, and indoctrination. It's not true in all schools, but there is a tendency for that, because I believe that we haven't really much moved since the 1870s, sort of, the Victorian ethic, the 19th century model, of too much emphasis on cognition and logic, which can be counted and measured, over the development of their souls and emotional well-being, which is actually beyond measure.
I guess, you see, some people would be saying, well, that's the parents' job, isn't it?
I can absolutely understand that, but there will be some parents who didn't have that input in their own early life, so they will be less likely to be able to give that to their children. I know that already the curriculum is overloaded in terms of trying to get children to read and write, but they can always catch up on that. What they can't catch up on so easily, Robert, is this emotional input that needs to be at home and at school, if at all possible. Over the last 150 years, there have been two main aims of education. So we've got sort of this transmission of a body of knowledge and cultural values from one generation to the next. And then we've obviously got to create a productive workforce. But I think education needs to be about the development of self-awareness, self-actualization, which embraces more the emotional, physical, spiritual, and intellectual stuff in kids, which is innate. They're innately creative, curious, imaginative, and we need to let them run with that much more. I think we dumb them down too much with the introduction of the national curriculum in 1988. The curriculum became the centre of education rather than the children. We are there for the children, not to tick boxes, improve league tables. School shouldn't be a business. It's about dealing with children's emotional well-being, which is absolutely paramount to our society. And I think it's the root of all social ills.
Can you teach emotional well-being? Can you teach emotional balance? Can you teach empathy? Can you teach all of those things?
Very good question, Robert. I think that in teachers' training, all teachers need to be given at least a basic understanding of child psychology, like the ego states and the transactional analysis that Eric Burns speaks of. Without that, it's all about drumming facts and figures into children. They can get all the facts and figures they want to from the internet. What we need to give them is an absolute self-awareness that they're loved unconditionally. Parents and teachers need to help children to develop radical self-love and self-compassion. It's a very difficult, broad subject, difficult to achieve. Everything starts with the individual. And I think if we all thought and consciously tried not to intimidate our children and put fear into them, but rather love, to forgive them for bad behaviour, they're still human beings. And they might be acting out some terrible thing that's happened in their earlier life just to get attention and to try and get resolution to whatever's going on.
Does this start very early on, do you think?
I do. I think it starts in the womb. I think the relationship between the parents very early on vibrationally affects the development of the child and also the birthing process. So many children who have difficult births are going to have trauma within their being for the rest of their lives unless it's resolved. I think everything is resolvable through therapy, through speaking, through listening to each other. It is a very, very challenging subject, but absolutely imperative that we get it right, especially the first 18 months of life. A child needs to look into the mother's eyes and know that they are safe and secure in that relationship. But so many mothers now can't wait to get back to work because for so many years we've lived in a patriarchal society where women have been denied their voice in the workplace. But women can have it all, but not all at the same time. I think when they know that knowing they're bringing another human being into the world, they've got to put aside some time where they're devoted to that other person.
Surely, saying that's the woman's role, surely it's the father's role as well if they're both there. I find that slightly odd.
Of course it is. Of course it is. The role of the father is imperative too, Robert. Of course it is. But it is the mother who holds the baby inside, who hopefully breastfeeds, although breastfeeding is not so popular these days. And it is that first relationship with the mother that I think is the most paramount. Having said that, yes, the role of the father is amazingly powerful too. And the father needs to support the mother. The mother needs to understand that the father also mustn't be shut out of the relationship. And that often happens because men have the history of going to work, being the breadwinners. But men are now becoming much more emotionally aware and responsive and seeing that they may not have had such a great childhood themselves. So they're determined to make it good for their children.
Is it also fair to say that we have to prepare ourselves, I'm talking a little later perhaps, that as much as I think unconditional love is a wonderful thing, and I got exactly that from my mum. My dad sadly died when I was little, but my mum poured unconditional love on me and to the very day she died.
How lucky were you?
Very, exceptionally lucky. But she also taught me that it's quite a tough world out there, and you got to be able to stand your own. You got to be able to, there's not everything is going to be lovely. Not everyone's going to be wonderful. Not everybody's going to be kind. And there are challenges in life.
Of course. So all learning, or what I'm talking about, this emotional development, is to develop internal resources within our children they can draw upon in times of inevitable adversity and challenge. Without it, they're less able to cope with adversity and challenge. All too soon, the bills start coming through the letterbox as adults. We need to really embrace the carefree and careless rapture of childhood fully. And then automatically, they will become autonomous and want to move away from us.
Isn't there also more of an issue now by the fact that, out there in the ether, in the internet, in the world, that young people in particular spend a lot of their time? It's not always a particularly kind place out there.
It certainly isn't. That's the place where bullying is nurtured above all, other environments. You see, I think children's current addiction to computers and social media places too much emphasis on external validation. They're in a constant state of hyperstimulation, which puts children into the sympathetic fight or flight mode. And that leads to the overproduction of cortisol, causing anxiety, depression and stress. What teachers and parents need to do is to give children more opportunities to be in the parasympathetic mode through greater emphasis on the arts, meditation, mindfulness, and convening with nature. I think forest bathing, forest walk, a nature walk is absolutely vital.
Well, I didn't do any of that, but I did do Red Bus Rovers into the centre of town on my own at the age of 9.
Love it.
And we were allowed to do that. We were, my mum had 3 kids of school age and no father, so she was pretty pushed. And she would say, from about the age of 8, I would say 7 or 8, she would say, "I'll see you at tea." And you were left to your own devices. Now, if she did that now, she'd probably be reported to social services.
Exactly. So we're living in a completely different world since the introduction of social media. And that's what's happened to us, Robert, I think is, in your childhood, we were probably in an environment which was relationship rich but information poor. And now we're information rich but relationship poor. But the freedom you were allowed to go on that bus was amazing. We simply can't do that with our children anymore.
Well, we could,
and
but we're too scared
so
to. We could, but we're too scared to.
That's right.
I remember myself as a parent, I was determined that from quite a young age I was going to let my children out more and more. And at the age of 6, they were going over to the corner shop. I'd stand and watch them from the doorstep, but they would go and do it. And I remember some neighbours saying, "Oh, you can't do that, you can't." Well, yes, I can, because they can, and I know they're ready for it, and I know they're...
Yeah.
And so I do think a lot of this, we are often too protective of our children.
I absolutely agree with that. We're really between the devil and the deep blue sea on this, aren't we? We want them to have autonomy. We want them to be independent. We need to give them boundaries, because children will push boundaries automatically. They seem to be conditioned almost to be boundaryless. So we've got to give them boundaries. It's a difficult balance between giving them enough freedom and giving them enough love over fear, but also, you see, I think that children, they come to us, but we don't own them. We learn as much from them and vice versa. So we've got to give them the autonomy, but we've also got to keep them safe in this rather... I'm almost scared to go out the door sometimes since COVID. We've been so indoctrinated to feel that we're going to become sick, that we're going to be in an environment that's going to judge us because we're not wearing a mask. But I think we've all been a bit too security conscious, and we've forgotten that freedom is our most important valued that we have in life.
I'm going to leave it there, Leonora, but the book is fascinating stuff. The book is called Let the Souls of Our Children Sing by Leonora Langley.